Is starting the recording. Welcome to the weekly chaos meeting. Second item of business is welcome Elizabeth.
I'm a
Hello.
skunk. You're killing me.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Yes, hello Elizabeth.
Welcome.
Hi.
We are super happy to have you here. Well, I'm speaking on behalf of everybody, but
We are.
Whether
yes.
they want it or not, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I am super happy that you're here, personally.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much.
So just so so folks have it in the minutes there, yeah, if you could add yourself to the list, that would be great. And here's what Elizabeth has done. Elizabeth, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, just who you are. I don't think you've met everybody on the call, and you know.
So yeah, I've been around in open source and technology for a really long time. I used to be a PHP developer, Go PHP. Their birthday was yesterday. Thank you very much. I had nothing to do with that. I just thought I'd give them a shout out. Yeah, so I started as a PHP developer. I really enjoyed the PHP community a lot. Super friendly, very helpful. I remember choosing between PHP and ASP, and PHP was all open source and super friendly, so I went that direction and never looked back. So yeah, I've been at SourceForge. I worked at SourceForge for a while as their community manager, which was super interesting, and I will tell you stories about that sometime in the future. I also worked at Engine Yard and GitHub. I worked at GitHub for about 5.5 years. And then I worked at Pivotal for about 6 months. And then for the last 18 months, I have not been in technology. I've been working as a nature photographer. So that's my hobby and my side passion, which I do all the time. And with COVID and all the state of the world, I decided maybe it was time to just get back in technology and dip my toes in the water again. So long story short, 20 years in what, 2 minutes? I don't know.
Yeah, that was
It was pretty nice coverage, though. You did a good job.
Well done. Well done.
Well, and I have, you know, I'm always open. So whenever, if anybody has any questions or wants to chat about anything, just hit me up. No biggie.
So I think all of us will be seeing Elizabeth around in many of the different calls and all that kind of stuff. So
Yes.
right on. All right. So next thing on, at least on the list here on the minutes, is yesterday we had a web page-a-thon, and we spent a couple hours going through the web page. It had gotten kind of old and creaky in some of the corners and needed some updating. So honestly, we just spent time kind of walking through each one of the issues and PRs and just resolving kind of long-standing issues on the website. I mean, it was things like on the website, it had still said that we had 2 working groups or 2 committees, the software and the metrics committees. Do you remember that structure?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
long ago.
The ancient old timers remember that.
So that's not right anymore. So we went ahead and updated things like that. So we also talked about ways to improve processes. So for example, right now, the community newsletter, you know, the Chaos Weekly it's really clunky in terms of getting it out and getting it available. And so how we can integrate that better with WordPress and the blogging functionalities in WordPress. So just kind of looking at streamlining some of the practices and processes around the website. So Georg, Elizabeth, Sean, Tarun, Kevin, anything to add there?
I reached out as my action item from that meeting to the Linux Foundation to get more WordPress accounts so that Elizabeth and Matt can also start making changes directly in WordPress.
Cool, thank you. Kevin, who was still there. Kevin, do you have comments at all?
Mostly just thank you all for taking part in that event. It's very helpful. So yeah, I think it went well, and I really appreciate the time that everyone spent on it, because I mean that was a long meeting. So.
But it was a working meeting. I think
Yeah.
we worked pretty much the whole time, so it was good. I think the plan is to do this maybe once a month or kind of on an as needed basis, just because it.
We'd let it go a while.
Yeah. Well, apparently we had let it go like 2 years, if that counts as a while.
Yeah, that's it does actually.
All right, cool. The next item is one I don't know. So somebody put that in there. I'm guessing it was Georg.
The
About
website, Igor
no,
Stein. Yeah, I don't know what that is at all.
Igor Steinmacher.
Yeah.
Anyone?
I'm assuming
So-
that's about translation.
This is, I put this, Igor Steinmacher is a researcher, professor, and his team is taking surveys that were done 10, 15 years ago on motivation in open source. And anyone who is looking at academic research on motivation for contributors in open source, the bulk of the work is starting to get really dusty and outdated because open source has changed quite a bit in the last 10 years, and the research into motivation is older than that. And so the Igor's team is taking those surveys, they've updated it a little bit. They're trying to replicate the research in today's time. And they have a survey that takes about 15, 20 minutes to tape. And they would like help with spreading it. And so I thought I'd share that effort here because we are in CHAOSS. We want to know what makes open source projects healthy. Motivation is a big part of that. Survey is in line with the tools that we use and promote. And so I wanted to see if anyone wants to help spread the word or just take the survey yourselves. I wanted to put it out there.
Can we see the results? Have you talked to him about that?
We can talk with him about it.
Okay.
I've seen the survey before they launched it, so I was one of the people who gave feedback on it.
Okay. It doesn't. Is it loading for other people?
Yes.
Yeah, the Igor thing. I haven't clicked on take the survey, but I can.
Okay.
He's done some really good research in the past. His work on technical and social barriers in open source is really good.
Okay.
So one of the questions I have is, do we want to promote this within the CHAOSS project? I can put it on the weekly newsletter, for example.
I mean, we've been approached in the past for distributing surveys, and we have generally said no for doing that. So precedent says no, but I don't think there's any harm in putting it in the newsletter.
No, I see no harm whatsoever in putting it in the newsletter.
Yeah.
It's a reputable person. Several people on the call vouched for them, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he did reach out to CHAOSS before, so at least he reached out to me.
Okay. Okay, that's fair.
The only thing I might ask is to put a little bit of context around it, because it doesn't look like they really explain like who they are in this and like what they're doing. So, I mean, I guess at the bottom, it talks a little bit about it, but I don't know. You might just want to like make sure people know that it's safe and not just like or like give them, you know, a little bit of context and motivation to fill it out, I think. Because if I saw this, I would maybe question like, oh, is my information safe? Is it like, you know, like, I don't know. I would just be maybe a little bit cautious. That's just me though.
Yeah. One of the ideas would also be maybe to have a blog post on our community blog about the state of research and why this updated view is necessary, and not so much as a hey, please take the survey, but really the background of why this is important.
Actually, yeah, have Igor write a blog post.
That would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that
I'll
a
get
lot.
on that.
I'm also happy to syndicate that to opensource.com to elevate it a little further too. If that makes
Put you
sense.
in touch.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, cool. Any other questions, comments for Georg?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I'm just taking a few notes here.
Okay. I will not put it in the newsletter. I'll wait for the blog post. I think that's a better avenue.
Yep, that's a good idea. All right, cool. All right, so Georg, you're remaining up at the moment. So yesterday, this was me. I was asking for, so one of the things that actually, step back just a bit here, one of the things that came up yesterday, and it was a comment that you had made, Georg, was that as the CHAOSS project continues to grow, it's difficult to know how all corners of the project operate. So the way that things operate is becoming decentralized, which is fine. But I do think it's important to continue to provide the opportunity to understand how those processes are working in these decentralized places. And the podcast has been gaining a lot of traction. And I had just asked Georg to kind of re-walk us through how an episode kind of comes to be, because to me it's still a little bit confusing as to who originates a meeting, how people end up on the call or on the podcast itself, how that selection process occurs. There seems like there's a lot of opting in. Anyway, I think working to clearly articulate that process and just make sure everybody understands what it's about is important. So I asked Gary if he could talk about it again. So if everybody knows it, then you can skip this part. But if everybody can clearly articulate how this works, then
yeah, I think this is a good opportunity. This is what the weekly calls, what we designed them for initially, to talk about how things are going, what we're doing. And so I'm happy to talk about the process that we have nailed down. So just to start at the beginning, the CHAOSS Cast is part of the community. And when you go there, we currently have 3 episodes live. The next one will be published on Friday. So every Friday we are publishing a new episode. And just if you're interested in metrics, I pulled up the metrics we have currently. So we have 185 downloads so far.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And you can see how that the first episode got the most number of downloads, and then 2 and 3 not yet. I just applied on Friday to be added to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all those platforms. So once we are on those platforms, I assume these numbers will go up. But it takes a while. So as we're building out different areas of CHAOSS, and CHAOSS Cast is the one that I was leading, I think it's super important to document how everything is working. So in the handbook, I created this page, CHAOSS Cast, and Matt Broberg was very helpful in describing all the process that we are having and filling out all this. So if you go to this website, we have a gigantic table of content just because we want to describe everything that is involved in this podcast. And one of the key things, because this is a community effort, is who are the people involved? That was one of the questions Matt had. So we have 2 key roles. One is organizers, and organizers are responsible for inviting people, for scheduling the recordings, for preparing the calls or the recordings, coordinating with different people, moderating, monitoring, and all that. And this is me, Matt Broberg, Vinya Logan, Dylan Marcy, and Sean Goggins. So the 5 of us, if you want an episode, if you have an idea for an episode, we do have an email address. It's podcast@chaos.community.
Is it podcast or casts?
Podcast@chaos.community.
Singular,
It's documented. Yeah.
I thought
It's
that's what it was.
documented in important links here. So all the resources, everything that we are using is documented from this community handbook page. And then we have panelists. So the
Can I
format,
ask you a question here?
Yes.
So with respect to the organizers, the responsibility is the invitation to the guest. When you say is responsible for the invitation, so the whomever that might be, the guest being the Augur team or John O'Bacon or Chris Anacek, is that right?
Yes, I'll get to the process here. I just wanted to highlight
okay. Sorry.
the different roles so that when we go into the process, we understand that. Different. So we have the organizers who are in charge of the processes, and then we have the panelists. These are community members who come onto the podcast to help with interviewing, to talk about community health and metrics and all that. So I'm going to skip a lot of this and go down to procedures. We have a section on procedures, and the one Matt is interested in is scheduling an episode. And it follows in 2 steps. One is determine the guest or panelist. So either someone says, hey, I would like to come on the podcast. We have someone like Kate Stewart had an idea. She emailed me saying, hey, I have these people. I think they would be good to come on the podcast. And then we figure out, okay, do you want to come on? What is your availability? And then we create a doodle and we send it out to the panelists. So the long list of people from the community that we had, we sent that out. We find a date and time, we nail that down, and then we do step 2, where we send out a specific calendar invite. We organize the recording, we put together a document, all that. If you're interested, so this is the general process. It's fairly detailed. If you read through it, you should have enough sense to execute it yourself if you ever wanted to.
You should.
But, one of the questions, before I open it up for questions, is how do we know what is currently being planned and all that? So we have a episode overview table or a planning document where we have things that we are currently working on. So this is the planning stage, where we keep track of the guests we want to invite, the topics, who's organizing it. This is during step 1, as we're talking to potential guests. Once we have the guest scheduled, it moves down to recording and editing. So the next one that is scheduled is Chris Anacek. Well, actually, there should be one with, there's one with
John as
Bacon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that should be added here. And then once it's scheduled, we have the recording, then it goes into editing. And once editing is done, it goes into ready for scheduling. And then we have the last table, and this is the released episodes that are going onto our podcast apps. So that's the process of how an episode comes together.
Okay, thank you. That was super helpful. Can you go back? What was the document you were showing before this? Was that the community handbook?
Yes.
So the episode overview table down there at the bottom, that's a pretty important document, right? The one you just showed.
The episode planner? Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that's what maybe that was something that would have been, can we raise that up or make that more visible?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for me personally, just to know what the plan is, because then I know whether or not to feel pressure to like go out and recruit a guest. Like I look at the list and I'm like, okay, we're okay for probably like a month, but I could recruit someone slowly.
Yeah, so if you go in here and you look at guests, we have the planning guest document. That's the same document.
That's the one you just showed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's all over linked to.
Okay. Okay.
So we have important links. There's the Google Drive, where if you go to the Google Drive, you have all of the documents, including the planning guests.
Okay. Matt, did you have a comment too?
I don't see planning guests.
Yeah, I was going to throw it out there that, there is, we started out with a particular intention of recording max like every other week and then publishing once a month. And then we just realized how much talent and interest we have in this community and wanted to, provide room for that to happen. So I'd certainly say like things are flying fast in the sense that like you'll see if you're on the podcast email, you'll just get asked if you want to join any of these panels that are all happening simultaneously. And I think we just landed on this document to be a good default structure. So you can see like what's happening, when is it happening, and who's on point for it. I think I want to acknowledge that it's still, as a panelist or organizer, it's still not clear exactly when you're needed to join versus you could join. That's still a challenge. That we'll figure out because because we're refining our practice there.
Yeah, honestly, I would maybe add that to the organizer's kind of job is to maybe limit the number of panelists, ask people who's involved, and because it seems like, especially like the Jonah Bacon one, it's like I got an invite to that. I'd already said that I wasn't going to join that one, but it seemed like all of the panelists got the invite, which is super confusing. And I think we don't want 10 panelists and one interviewee either. So I think we need to limit the number of panelists and be a little bit more organized about who is on each one. And we're a rotating group, so we can rotate in and out as needed. But I think the organizer needs to coordinate that to limit the number of panelists.
The invite was a mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, I think ultimately choosing how many people to join is one of the responsibilities of the organizer. But I would say like one of the challenges is like we don't have like a specific slot where we're recording because we tend to work around guest schedules. So like shooting out to find out who's available and then filtering from there, it seems to be a good default. Does that still make sense, Dawn? But then like once people filter out, like filter them out.
Yeah, well, and you may need to filter more than, like there might be five or six of us available, but you might need to filter it down to the 4 people that maybe are most relevant, or
2 in an organizer is what we're aiming for max, because as we've learned, we tried to do more and it's a lot of talking heads. It's like a bad CNN interview, which is redundant.
Totally.
Cool. We're still learning. We're still refining.
It's a work in process.
And the organizers are all responsible for the recording and all of the editing. Is that right? So the panelists really have no role in that. They take part in the planning document. So there's always a document as well that kind of precedes the podcast for each person. And so that planning document would have the guest, 1 organizer, and 2 panelists. Is that right?
Yes.
At least that was what Matt had kind of implied, that there would be 1 organizer and or maybe Garrick, I forget, but kind of a limited set of people in the podcast.
Yeah.
And so then once the decision is made as to who the guest is, obviously who the organizer is, and then the couple panelists that would join, then a planning document would go out to those 4 people. Is that right?
Mhm.
And then you would come up with the questions and.
I think
Get that right?
I will say that Georg and Matt Broberg kind of do give it some consistency right now. And that is, I think that's going to be helpful for people to find the podcast to be a series that's got some coherence to it, that they're not randomly different from each other. I mean, if you really want to build an audience, I think having someone that sort of helps us all learn the patterns to follow. And I know I don't know them yet.
Yep. No, that's absolutely right. And so we have a team of 5 organizers. One is responsible for the publishing, so we have 4 that actually schedule and organize recordings. And so this Matt Broberg and I, we did the first couple, and now Vinya is coming on board, and so Vinya has to learn how we do it. And then Sean, whenever you're ready, you can let me or Matt know, and
I think I've been on like 3 or 4 of them. 3 of them, I think.
Yeah, as a panelist. Yeah.
I don't see Jono Bacon on the schedule, but we're doing it Thursday, as I understand it.
Yeah.
So, Georg, can you bring up just share the screen to that episode document one more time?
Sure.
So can you scroll down?
Why do I have a different? I'm
Jono
seeing a different.
Here, and this needs to go.
Oh, planning state. Okay, I was missing that top box for some reason.
You beat me to it, Georg. It's just about to copy that down there.
So can you scroll up a little bit? I'm sorry. So in this document, is there a link for each of the people to the planning document?
So the planning document here, so Emma Irvin, I was talking to yesterday, and Emma would have time end of July, early August to do an episode, and I started creating an episode document that is linked to here.
Okay.
And there's nothing in here yet because Emma and I haven't talked about content yet. The next step would be to figure out what times Emma is available and then invite panelists and figure out who the 2 panelists are.
Does this, if I wanted to get to the Chris Anichek planning document from here, could I?
Yes, you can go down to where it's planned. Chris Anichek, CNCF, DevStats.
Gotcha.
And you can open the document here.
Okay. Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you.
If you have any ideas for how to make it better, we're still improving our process.
And I think your attention to detail has been really great in terms of sound quality and stuff like that.
Thank you.
And Georg, just to clarify, you're kind of like the owner of this. So if there's a hole or like you see down the line, like we don't have enough in the pipeline, like you would be the one to kind of keep track of that and like raise the flag, like, hey, I need help. We need ideas and all that. Okay.
Matt Broberg and I are that together.
Perfect.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind Georg being listed as the primary, but I'm a default rubber ducky for conversations about this.
What that means?
No, rubber duck programming?
No, I guess I've never done that.
No, it's worth doing.
Is that where if you break the build, you have to have the rubber duck or something on your?
No, that's shaming. That's different. Okay. We'll talk elsewhere.
Okay. All right.
So I think what was really helpful to me here was the link to the planning document. And then from there, knowing that I can get to, or what do you call that main document? The episode document. And knowing from there that I can get to the sub-planning documents. And then also knowing that like the organizers are really the ones that are responsible for the outreach and the scheduling. And the and that list will probably stay relatively small. I mean, maybe 5 or 6 organizers. And then the panelist list could grow to 30. I mean, that could become a pretty big list.
Yeah, and as a panelist, what we agree to is that every time we are looking for panelists, that we can email you with a doodle poll or something. And if you have time and then you are selected, because as Don mentioned, there may be more than 2 panelists that have time, not everyone will be selected. But if you're selected, that then you join the call, you help with the questions and have a nice conversation. And that's it.
Okay. And I think to Don's point too, like if 7 people could make the podcast, that the organizers just pick 2 of those and move on from there.
Yep. Okay.
All right, cool. Seriously, thank you so much for this. It's just a wonderful thing for the project. So, and thanks for kind of walking through the logistics again. All right, cool.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always happy to talk about the podcast.
I know. We've learned that about you.
It's Georg's new shiny thing.
Maybe while we're on this, I don't know if anybody noticed when Georg was on the website pulling up CHAOSS.Cast, we now have CHAOSS Tube. So we got 100 subscribers, so we could actually name the channel. And so we have CHAOSS.Con, CHAOSS.Cast, and CHAOSS Tube. It's done. There's no going back. You can't you can't unring that bell. We can't change it.
What's done is done.
That's right.
There's a single horse picture on Instagram with that hashtag. So I think there's room to grow into that space.
Horse picture?
I don't get it either, but I just linked to it in chat.
Oh, that's just a random picture, I assume.
We'll be sure.
CHAOSS Tube is Instagram?
No, it's YouTube.
Matt sent me an Instagram with CHAOSS Tube.
I know.
But that's not the same thing. I see.
Terribly sorry, Sean. I feel like I'm sending you down the wrong path today.
Sorry, it's been fine. It's been fun.
I think the point here is on Instagram, the hashtag has not been utilized much. So we can dominate the space.
Very good.
That's right. All right. So next thing that is we have to return to the GitHub thing. We really only have about 10 or 15 minutes in today. And I think it was the last community call.
I missed for some reason. I can't remember what my.
So Grimoire Lab had come on to talk about the migration. It might have been 2 weeks ago.
No, I think it was last week because the Google Summer of Code had just started. That's what I was in the middle of. I just had tons of GSOC things and I just forgot about the time.
So from the Grimoire Lab side of things, they had suggested that it was not a terribly intensive effort, at least only on the Grimoire Lab side. So for those of you that are kind of new to this, right, we've been talking about the potential to move off of GitHub over to GitLab. But maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was kind of a pretty serious discussion about, like we need to just hold up for a second here and really take a look at what the effort is in doing something like this for a project that's running honestly pretty well on GitHub. I mean, we've been able to get our work done. So Sean, you did fill out
I filled out
the table. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
So, I mean, there's some of these, I think I made a comment to this effect, but some of the line items are sort of integrated, overlapping. And for Augur, the biggest thing is all of our integration and building for like everything, testing, deployment, docs. It's all automated with Travis. So like decoupling it from GitHub now would actually like rip away a bunch of work that we've done to try to make it more self-maintaining. And that's where the highs come from. Like we just kind of talked through a few scenarios, Gabe and Carter and I, and in each scenario, Carter could list a bunch of things that he's done to automate, like Docker builds or testing, deployment, migration, all the migration from one environment to another, all the things that just are part of maintaining an open source software project, and doing it with student labor, which is like probably the biggest difference between Grimoire Lab and Augur, is that I don't have any what I'd call professional developers. They're very professional and very skilled, but they're also, they don't have the experience that the Grimoire Lab folks have. So it's just more work for the team that I have, which is a very good team, but they'd have to figure out a whole new set of things for something they literally spent the last 6 months getting right, maybe the last year. Carter's really been intensively focused on it since Open Source Summit North America, though. So yeah, I'll stop talking. I mean, it's just like big. It's in the hundreds of hours at least of human time, and when you start getting into the hundreds of hours, and like I could do a more detailed estimate, but I've only got Carter and Gabe for one more semester. I really don't want them to spend that whole semester doing a migration.
I think these are fair points. Questions or comments for Sean, specifically about Augur and the impact? I mean, to me, if one of the pieces of software really looks at this move, I'm just speaking on my own behalf here, but if one of the pieces of software that's really critical to the CHAOSS project is looking at this move as a huge lift and potentially problematic given the resources that you had, that's what I was hearing you say, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the challenges is how do we keep the project going forward if our top people are busy doing GitLab migration in the limited time they have remaining.
To me, that puts a pretty big red flag on things. I don't know what other people's thoughts are. I'd like more than my own thoughts on this, but
I kind of feel the same way you do, Matt. I mean, this was my concern from the beginning, was what the trade-offs that we'd be making as a project by spending so much time migrating.
Yeah.
I mean,
the other thing somebody pointed out to me is that somebody drew it to my attention after last week's meeting when I wasn't there, is that every other Linux Foundation project is on GitHub. So this will be a pretty big move off the platform where all of the other projects are, as I understand it. I mean, that's maybe not a reason not to do it, but that definitely gave me pause. Like maybe that also gave me pause.
And to be honest, I mean, looking at the upside, like the reasons that we wanted to move to GitLab, from my standpoint, are not particularly compelling. They weren't, we weren't stuck on something. There wasn't like a huge roadblock that's preventing us from doing productive work. It felt kind of like a nice to have, and I don't think sort of a nice to have is worth the turmoil that's going to be caused in the project.
other thoughts on this?
Yeah, my understanding is part of the, like, I'm following projects that are moving from GitHub to GitLab, and it tends to be on the philosophical note that GitLab is open source, both in its user experience and its actual product. And while I value that, and I know particularly, the Grimoire Lab people are passionate about the free software side of FLOSS and upholding that. But so I wonder if that was part of the motivator. But I couldn't agree more with Don's point that the lift and the separation from the core community of the Linux Foundation and what we're already doing is a huge risk that is difficult to impossible to calculate. So I'd be more interested in, if we were to take any steps, it would be something on like, what does it look like to automatically have a fork over on GitLab? But again, that's more work than we need right now, unless there's a particular goal around it. So yeah, TLDR, unless like this is a must do, then don't do it. Like it's going to be so much more work.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's a lot of work for, and I think it just is. It could be a lot of work. It's definitely more work than I would have guessed. But
So, okay, so
yeah.
I feel like this is slowly coming to a halt towards not moving. I'm just trying to listen to the conversation. And because this is kind of an all or nothing kind of thing, the CHAOSS project either goes as a group all, or we don't go. That's kind of my take on it. Because there are the issues that have been raised here, that it's looking to me like this is not going to happen. Again, I'm just one person, but that's how I'm like looking at the discussion from my end.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that, with the one caveat that none of the Grimoire Labs people that were championing this, other than Georg, is here on the call. So we're coming to a quick consensus without the group that was championing it. So I just want to be cautious that we're not making a decision.
I think I was trying to think of a way to say that. I don't want Grimoire Lab to be grotesquely unhappy about this choice.
So one of I was the one who said, okay, we need to have this conversation in the community because Grimoire Lab does see value in moving. One of the avenues that I would still be open to exploring is to move just Grimoire Lab, because there is very loose coupling between the different projects, and Cregit is not even in the CHAOSS organization on GitHub, and badging is now also its own GitHub org, so completely else, somewhere else. So maybe that is something we can at least think about to give the Grimoire Lab team the option to use the GitLab features they're looking to use.
People's thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously, I think splintering the community between the two is suboptimal, but it might, I'd like to see that not happen. But I don't know what the other examples you pointed to here are. The badging.
Well, Cregit, I mean, that's a slightly different conversation, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty tightly coupled with the Linux kernel and counting stuff over there, though.
The point I was trying to make is there's no technical benefit to having everything in the same GitHub org. It's just the aesthetic thing, at least in my opinion. Maybe I'm overlooking something.
I think it's a community thing, not an aesthetic thing. It's about building community around CHAOSS as a whole, and having the metrics and the tools and everything kind of as one thing that feels more cohesive, that we can build a community around. That would be my concern about fragmenting it off into separate places.
Yeah, I think moving one of the software packages out of the main repository would hurt our cause.
That's a good point.
Okay, so
but Dawn makes a very, very important point, which is that the people who are championing it are not here, and so I think I don't think we can make a decision without them. I think that would be wrong-headed.
Yeah, no, I wasn't trying to drive towards consensus in this meeting. I'm just trying to listen to the conversation that I feel like I've been hearing over the course of several months now. And what started out as kind of a desire to kind of do this right out of the gate, or that there was a lot of positive around it, has slowed down a lot, and a lot of concerns have been raised along that slowdown. And so that's all I was trying to indicate that I was seeing over the course of time. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Garrett, can you maybe ask some of maybe Santi to come on, or Daniel maybe next week to the community call?
Yes, I will let them know.
Thanks. All right, just a couple minutes here. Venu, I saw that you had added something.
Actually, I added that, but Venue may want to talk about it. So I published Venue's blog today. So I'll let Venue talk about it though.
Yeah, I just thought of adding a blog post in the CHAOSS community blog so that we can use it for sharing about Google season of docs. Yeah, so I just drafted a blog post and I sent a PR and it was merged.
Okay. Do we have, is there an update on that from the LF at this point?
No. We are receiving a couple of students who are interested to contribute. I'm redirecting them to the community mailing list. Like I've been sending them details about mailing list and the community calls. But I didn't get any updates from the Linux Foundation. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for that.
I think there's another discussion about what is it, Gitbook, and is that Georg? Is that the conversation that's happening with?
Garrett is he wants to apply to the Google season of docs, and he wants to work on the community handbook, and he really thinks that Gitbook is the way to go.
Is it another documentation syntax I have to learn?
It's an entirely different system.
Why?
And so, yeah, I just had asked Garrett to have that conversation in the community, because this is something we all together have to decide. Do we want yet another system? Or if we do get a Google season of docs student, do we ask them to work?
Like even just pilot this?
Yeah, pilot this. Or do we just say, no, we want to stay within Markdown files in the repository, or go that next step of having nicely formatted GitHub pages that is automatically generated from those Markdown files?
Okay. Well, we're at the end of our time, so why don't I'll put that on the agenda to start next week, the Gitbook thing.
I mean, okay, yes.
What do you use for documentation in Augur, Sean? What is that?
We use readthedocs.io, which is pretty widely used in open source.
Python mostly, but yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's RST is the restructured text is the syntax. So I had to learn that in the last year. And then, I know Markdown, I know LaTeX. So give me another syntax. Let's do it. They're like programming languages. Pick up another one. I mean, this actually looks pretty snazzy. Like a person, you would need to know less about coding than you do with Markdown and restructured text and LaTeX. It looks like. And so
Gitbook, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah. I mean, it does look like it's the on-ramping might be easier for a non-technical person.
Okay. Well, in the spirit of time.
Maybe we should add the system you're using to the evaluation.
Say that again, Gary.
The system Sean's using for Augur for documentation, maybe we should add that as an option.
Yeah, good. Cool. All right.
Yeah, I'll get Carter on the call if you want to talk about that. All right, I'll see you guys.
Bye, folks.
Bye.